The screen lights up your face like a confession booth, not the soft kind, the kind that makes your pores look like evidence. Your thumb scrolls, smooth, practiced, innocent, a tiny motion, a harmless ritual. But somewhere inside the glass, somewhere behind the clean interface and the friendly rounded icons, there's a chain. You don't see it because the whole point of modern life is to make the chain feel like air. And that's the trick. You didn't invent it. You didn't sign up for it. You just woke up one day and realized your comfort has a passport, and someone else's pain is the visa stamp. That's the quiet horror of being alive right now. You can be kind and still be complicit. You can be careful and still be part of the damage. You can try to be good, and the system still prints your goodness on paper made from someone else's forest. You're guilty no matter what. And because you're not a villain, because you're not built to enjoy that sentence, your nervous system does what it always does when it meets an impossible problem. It freezes, or it numbs. That's moral paralysis. That's the soul locking its knees so it doesn't collapse in public. Here's a micro scene you know too well. You're in a store, nothing dramatic. Fluorescent lights, a playlist designed to feel like emotional wallpaper. You pick up a chocolate bar, just a snack, just sugar and distraction. Then you remember, there's a whole conversation about supply chains, labor, child work, land theft, corporate loopholes. Your brain pulls out a spreadsheet of misery. You stand there holding the bar like it's a loaded object, and then the internal trial begins. If you buy it, you're part of the problem. If you don't, you're still part of the problem, because you're standing in a system built on extraction anyway. And your refusal doesn't magically rewrite the lives already chewed up. So you do what humans do when morality becomes a maze with no exit. You either buy it and hate yourself quietly, or you put it back and congratulate yourself while the machine keeps humming. Either way, you walk out feeling stained. That word, stained, is important, because what you're chasing isn't ethical behavior, it's ethical purity. And purity is a fantasy that the modern world sells you like skincare. Be clean, be conscious, be the kind of person who never ever causes harm. But the global system is designed like a funnel. Your choices pour into it, your paycheck pours into it, your attention pours into it, and the funnel leads to places you will never visit, to workers you will never meet, to consequences you won't watch unfold. So the myth of Saf Masumiet, pure innocence, becomes impossible, not because you're secretly evil, because you're embedded. This is what people mean when they talk about systemic evil, not demons, not cartoon villains, just incentives stacked like bricks, profit as gravity, convenience as a drug, distance as a sedative. The system doesn't need you to be cruel. It only needs you to keep living, and you do. So your mind tries to solve it like a math problem. If I optimize my purchases, if I only buy ethical brands, if I recycle perfectly, if I avoid everything bad, then I can finally feel clean. But global ethics isn't a math problem. It's a weather system. You don't win against it by holding your breath. This is where the guilt starts doing something darker than just hurting you. It starts controlling you, because guilt is supposed to be a signal, a small alarm that says, hey, adjust course. But when the alarm never stops, when it rings at every meal, every purchase, every click, it stops being information. It becomes atmosphere. You can't live inside constant accusation without adapting, so you adapt in one of two ways. Option 1, paralysis. You overthink everything until you do nothing. You become a moral perfectionist, stuck in analysis like a fly glued to a window. Your conscience becomes a courtroom that never adjourns. Option 2, desensitization. You shut the courtroom down. You turn guilt into background noise. You scroll past suffering like it's another ad. You learn to say, well, what can I do? The way people say, it is what it is, as if resignation is wisdom. Both paths serve the machine. Either way, the system gets what it wants, your continued participation with minimal friction. And here's the part people avoid saying out loud. The system didn't just trap you, it trained you to want the trap, because your life is built on contracts you didn't read, but still signed with your habits. Your phone is the perfect symbol of this. Not because the phone is bad, but because it's a tiny cathedral of global extraction that feels like a toy. You hold it and think connection, music, maps, work, love. You don't think about mining, factories, logistics, wages, surveillance capitalism, attention monetization. You think about a meme. That's how systemic evil hides. It puts a smiley face on the front door. Now a second micro scene. You're lying in bed. You tell yourself you'll sleep early, but your hand reaches for the phone like it's checking your pulse. You open an app. You see a headline about a humanitarian crisis, then a video of someone dancing, then an ad for shoes made from sustainable materials, then a comment war, then a clip of a child crying in rubble, then a luxury watch. Your brain is forced to metabolize tragedy and entertainment in the same swallow. That's not information. And after enough of that, your empathy doesn't expand. It gets tired. Your nervous system starts doing trauma accounting like a burnt-out accountant. 1 tragedy, 2 tragedies, 5 tragedies. Balance sheet doesn't change. No action possible. Close the tab. This is moral paralysis evolving into moral fatigue. And fatigue is dangerous because it feels like realism. I'm not heartless, you tell yourself. I'm just being practical. But practical can be a mask for helplessness. When people are exposed to too many problems they can't solve, they don't become saints. They become smaller. They shrink their circle of care until it fits inside their daily survival, and then they call that maturity. Now let's diagnose it properly, without the Instagram therapy language. You're stuck between 2 unbearable identities. The first identity is the good person, the one who believes they should not cause harm. The second identity is the real person, the one who eats, buys, works, scrolls, drives, consumes. Cognitive dissonance lives in that gap. It's the mental pain of being both, and your brain will do almost anything to close the gap, either by changing your behavior or by changing your story. Most people change the story because it's cheaper. It's not that bad. Everyone does it. My choice doesn't matter. The problem is too big. At least I'm not like those people. That last one is the most poisonous, because the moment you turn ethics into an identity competition, you're not trying to reduce harm. You're trying to feel superior. And superiority is just guilt-wearing cologne. Jung had this idea of the shadow, the parts of us we don't want to admit. In a modern context, the shadow isn't just anger or jealousy. It's comfort. It's the part of you that loves the convenience, the speed, the cheap price, the dopamine hit, the part of you that would rather not know. So you split yourself in 2, the conscious self that cares, and the consumer self that keeps feeding the machine. And you try to pretend they're not roommates, but they are, and they fight at night. That's why this topic hits so hard. Because it's not just politics, it's not just ethics. It's the fact that your daily life is built like a house on top of somebody else's basement. You can't live in the house without benefiting from the basement. And now we get to the twist, the trapdoor. The real reason this guilt feels unbearable isn't only because you're complicit. It's because you still want innocence as a certificate. You want a moral receipt that proves you're one of the clean ones. But innocence isn't a certificate. In adulthood, innocence is mostly a performance. A performance of not knowing, or not looking, or looking just enough to feel informed but not enough to change. So the deepest uncomfortable layer is this. Sometimes the guilt isn't there to motivate you. Sometimes it's there to protect you. Because as long as you feel guilty, you can still feel like a good person trapped in a bad world. Guilt becomes a substitute for action. It's a strange emotional hack. If you suffer internally, you can treat that suffering like payment. Like the universe is a vending machine. Insert guilt, receive absolution. But reality doesn't accept that currency. The machine doesn't care if you feel bad. It cares if you keep buying. And your guilt, if it stays stuck as feeling, actually keeps you inside the cycle. It keeps you focused on your moral self-image instead of the actual harm flowing through the system. That's dirty hands. The idea that living ethically in a complex world means you will touch things you don't want to touch. Not because you're weak, but because there is no perfectly clean route through a contaminated landscape. The question becomes, do you freeze because your hands aren't clean? Or do you learn to reduce what you can reduce and stop pretending you can levitate above the mess? This is where harm reduction enters, not as a trendy phrase, but as a survival strategy for conscience. Not perfection, reduction. Because perfection is a God fantasy. Reduction is a human plan. So what does the exit look like? Not a manifesto, not a shopping list of ethical brands that will magically save you. Real exits are boring, biological, strategic. Exit 1. Replace purity with direction. Stop asking, am I innocent? Start asking, am I moving the needle? In practical terms, this means you pick a few leverage points, areas where your choices actually have weight, and you commit there, not everywhere. Because trying to do everything is how you end up doing nothing. Maybe it's food, maybe it's tech upgrades, maybe it's fashion, maybe it's how you invest, where you bank, which companies you give your attention to. You don't get points for scattering your effort across 100 micro-choices and burning out. You choose a lane and become consistent. Consistency beats purity because consistency survives Tuesday. Exit 2. Build friction on purpose. The global system thrives on frictionless consumption, one-click buying, autoplay recommendations that feel like telepathy, convenience that steals your agency while thanking you for your time. So you fight it with the opposite. You add small obstacles that give your conscience time to speak before your impulse signs the contract. Delete the shopping apps from your phone. Unsave your card info. Use a waiting rule for purchases. Curate your feeds like you're cleaning a wound, not decorating a room. Your behavior is a habit loop. Cue, craving, response, reward. If you change the environment, you change the loop. And when you change the loop, you reduce harm without needing to be a heroic person. You stop relying on willpower, which is basically a candle in a hurricane. Exit 3. Convert guilt into a budget. This is the most adult move. Instead of pretending you can avoid every compromised product, you treat harm like a limited resource you want to spend less of. A budget isn't moral perfection. It's an honest admission of constraint. You say, I am inside the system. I will participate. But I will participate with eyes open, and I will reduce where I can. Maybe you buy fewer things overall. Maybe you buy second-hand. Maybe you repair instead of replace. Maybe you keep your phone longer. Maybe you choose 1 or 2 organizations to support regularly instead of guilt donating once a year when a video makes you cry. And you stop doing the worst thing, doom consumption without output. If you're going to look at the world's pain, you owe yourself a channel for it. Action, donation, volunteering, political engagement, mutual aid, community building, something that turns awareness into pressure. Otherwise, you're just renting tragedy for emotional stimulation. That sounds harsh, but it's real. Now, one more micro scene, because this is where it becomes painfully modern. You're at a cafe with a friend. They start talking about ethical consumption with the intensity of someone defending a religion. They name brands. They shame other brands. They use the right words. They look clean. And you feel the familiar internal twist. If you disagree, you're part of the problem. If you agree, you're signing up for a lifestyle you can't afford, financially or mentally. Meanwhile, both of you are holding smartphones. Both of you are drinking something shipped across borders. Both of you are wearing clothes made somewhere you didn't visit. The cafe becomes a tiny theater of righteousness. And you realize something almost funny. A lot of moral conversations aren't about reducing harm. They're about reducing anxiety. They're about finding a tribe where you can be one of the good ones and finally breathe. That's why these discussions turn sharp so fast, because underneath them isn't ethics. It's fear. Fear that you're not a good person. Fear that your comfort is stolen. Fear that someone will point at you and say, you benefit. So here's the real quiet exit beneath the exits. Stop making your morality a personal brand. The moment your goodness becomes a performance, you're trapped again, because performances need applause, and applause is addictive. And addiction always comes back to consumption of attention, validation, identity. Instead, become boringly committed. Do less harm where you can. Support better systems where possible. Accept that you will still have dirty hands. And refuse to let dirty hands become an excuse for doing nothing. Because the opposite of moral paralysis isn't moral purity. It's moral adulthood. And adulthood is the willingness to act without the guarantee of being innocent. It's saying, I am part of this, and that is exactly why I'm responsible for what I touch. Not responsible for everything. That's narcissism in disguise. Responsible for your slice, for your leverage, for your decisions when nobody is watching. Global ethics isn't solved by a saint. It's shifted by millions of imperfect people refusing to let the machine run on autopilot. So no, you won't become perfectly clean, but you can become intentionally less harmful. And that's not nothing. That's the difference between being asleep inside the system and being awake enough to create friction. Now here's the question that will bother you in the best way. If innocence is impossible, what exactly are you still using guilt to avoid doing?